This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. What an interesting episode we have coming today. We get to dive into the ocean.
Yes, my favorite ecosystem to explore. So what problem are we solving today?
How do tiger sharks help the ocean ecosystem?
How do tiger sharks help with the ocean ecosystem? This is going to be a fascinating episode, I think. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the terrific Wells Howe. He is the director of the Beneath the Waves group.
Welcome to the show, Wells.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here with you both.
Yeah, well, this is going to be so much fun because we're going to talk about ocean conservation, which we know is one of the things that I love. It's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm wondering, as a kid, did you always love the ocean?
Spoiler alert, I certainly did. I grew up near the beach, going to the ocean as much as I possibly could. So it was always my dream one day to spend as much time in the ocean as possible and try to protect it. So I am doing my dream job.
That's fantastic. Not everybody gets to do that, right?
Nope,
Okay.
but everyone should certainly try.
Yes.
Agreed. Everybody go back and listen to that first 1 minute again. Agreed. Okay, so when you were a kid, this is a two-part question. Where did you live that you were able to get into the ocean? And when you were in the ocean, were you a kid were you playing more in the sand? Did you like being underwater? Did you like the animals and try to chase fishes? Which kid were you?
Yes, so I lived and still do, Jeff, in Boston, Massachusetts. So I would spend the summer months down by the Cape or all along the seashore. And then in the winter,
Favorite place in the planet.
it is. And in the winter, when it was too cold, I'd go to the aquarium, the Boston Aquarium, all the time.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm
and
from
so
Worcester.
Worcester, okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm up on the North Shore. So when I was a kid, I used to love going into the water and exploring underwater. I felt like an astronaut,
Wow.
seeing fish, swim underwater, trying to hold my breath for as long as possible. I'd pretend I was a fish.
Right?
Yeah.
And seeing them swimming and snorkeling was always my favorite activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, oceans, they're just amazing. There's so many things, and the New England Aquarium up there is one of my absolute favorite ones to go to. So I'm curious, because we're going to be talking about tiger sharks. So is that the animal that you liked as a kid, or did you kind of move into that? What do you think?
I moved into it because tiger sharks live in warmer waters, usually,
Okay.
than what we have here in Massachusetts. So it brought me to a place where I could go in the water year round. But growing up as a kid, my favorite animal was probably humpback whales. I used to go out to Stellwagen Bank and whale watch.
Yeah.
So I always
Yeah.
loved whales growing up as a kid.
Yeah, they are beautiful, beautiful animals.
And then really quickly, did your love of the ocean and marine animals, did you go to college for, say, marine biology?
So I went to college. I went to school in Boston for a double program for both business and for conservation for science.
Ah,
So-
okay.
Oh, okay.
I always knew I wanted to focus on the ocean. And then I went back and actually to graduate school to then get more technical training on being a ocean scientist.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what drew you to the conservation side? Because there's a lot of people that go into, marine biology and then they pick a particular animal or whatever. What drew you to the conservation side?
To me, it was always the storytelling aspect of how much the
Ah.
ocean meant to me and
Yeah.
where I could feel like I could make change. There was a great number of students and friends of mine who had very technical and scientific training that could do things in the laboratory that I couldn't.
Right.
But I always felt like I could do a lot of work in advocacy and protecting the ocean through storytelling and conservation. So
That's fantastic.
I do know enough to look under a microscope and know what I'm looking at, but my ability to impact change is more on the conservation, on making sure people know why the ocean's so important.
That is a huge part of it, is being able to communicate and get, everyday people to just understand why the ocean is so important to our entire ecosystem on this whole planet. So I love that that's the side of this that you chose too.
Yeah, I think they both need each other, right? I mean, you need incredible science and scientists to focus on the nitty gritty of understanding the ocean. And then you need people who want to protect it and talk about the value, like you said, Jennifer, it has to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up being pulled or led towards tiger sharks?
Yes. So as I mentioned, tiger sharks live in warmer waters. They are basically like the great white shark of the Caribbean. And so our team has an ongoing research project throughout the Caribbean, but mostly in the Bahamas. And in the Bahamas, the tiger shark is like King Kong. I mean, they are top of the food chain. If you're going to be studying the Bahamas, you need to be studying the tiger sharks. So we've been doing work and researching them for the last 10 years or so.
Oh, wow. And how did all of this research lead to you to help with ocean conservation just by studying tiger sharks?
Sure. So, Jennifer, this is going to sound like a crazy story, but it's true, every word of it.
Yeah.
We actually partnered with about 10 tiger sharks. And I say partnered because we've been studying them. So following their movements, following what they're eating, following how they're using their environments, swimming over coral reefs, swimming over different ecosystems.
Yeah.
And what we did was we would actually put camera tags, GoPros, on the dorsal fin of these tiger sharks that we were studying.
Wow.
So we would catch them, release them, put cameras on their dorsal fin. And like I said, 10 of these individuals, we followed them for the better part of a year.
Wow.
And when we reviewed all that camera footage, what we found led to a big discovery. So the tiger sharks are underwater explorers. They were, quite literally underwater astronauts exploring new parts of the ocean that had never been seen before.
Now that's a great story. That's a good story. Yeah.
It is.
A good way to tell that.
Here's what's even more amazing is what they found has had huge implications on the health of the ocean. So those tiger sharks were spending most of their time, 75% of their time, swimming over seagrass. And seagrass it's actually a flower, but it lives underwater. It grows in the sand.
Right.
And there's over 50,000 square miles of this seagrass in the Bahamas. And it had never been known before until the tiger sharks discovered it, how big it was. And so that partnership with tiger sharks literally opened our eyes to understanding how big this environment was and how important it's been for the health of the planet and all the benefits that it provides to the atmosphere and to the food chain throughout the world. So tiger sharks were the main reason why we discovered the largest underwater seagrass meadow on Earth.
Holy cow. That's amazing.
My God.
That's amazing.
That really is. Okay, we're going to have to dig into that a little deeper. But before we do, is the tiger sharks the reason that you found it? Was it because the tiger sharks were, obviously it was the cameras, but were they swimming? Is it farther away from the Bahama Islands than humans typically go? It was just an area that no one had ever dove deep enough to find there?
Yeah, so I think people always knew that there was huge expanses of seagrass across the Bahamas, but it had never been mapped. It's really hard to see unless you're swimming underwater. And so there are parts of the Bahama Banks. There's two of them, the Little Bahama Bank and the Great Bahama Bank, that are miles and miles from any island or any place where a boat could travel.
Right.
So we were able to patch together all of these different tracks that the tiger sharks swam and say, okay, there's seagrass here, there's not seagrass here. So they did much more exploration in a year than we could ever do in our lifetimes.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's what I'm thinking. So they swim faster and more efficiently, we all know, than humans or even a boat. But I'm also assuming they had GPS on the camera too. So then
They-
you could kind of, like you said, put it all together and figure out exactly how big this thing was.
Exactly, Jennifer. So they don't have to hold their breaths underwater or be on scuba tanks like we do.
Yeah.
And they're far faster swimming than we are. And
They
yes,
don't
so
run
every-
out of gas like a boat.
They do not run out of gas. So yes, we had GPS tags on them with those cameras, so we could sync up and see exactly
Wow.
where they were and look at the camera footage to say, okay, here's seagrass, here's not. They mapped out seagrass far more efficiently than we ever could with human technology.
Oh my gosh.
You just said it. They mapped it out. As soon as you said that, I had a picture in my brain. These tiger sharks were like Google Maps cars.
Yeah.
Driving around underwater,
Yeah.
mapping out what's out there. So, how big are we talking about here? Can you give us I have a hard time picturing 50,000 square miles. How big are we talking?
So it is so big, Jeff, that you can see the underwater seagrass meadow from the International Space Station. So it is
Wow.
probably the biggest ocean feature outside of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, which you can also see from
Oh
space.
my gosh.
It is all
Wow.
of the crystal blue water. If you looked at a Google Earth view or if you looked at satellite
Right.
imagery, all
Okay.
that light blue water around the Bahamas off the coast of Florida, a majority of that is seagrass. And that's what the tiger sharks discovered.
Wow. So
That's fantastic.
so what is the significance of this discovery, right? Like why is it so cool that we discovered this huge amount of seagrass?
Right. So I mentioned that there's huge benefits to that seagrass, which we are studying all the time with different colleges, different universities, and
Right.
partners. But one of the biggest ones is that seagrass pulls carbon dioxide out of the environment and stores it in its roots, just like trees do in the rainforest.
Right?
Okay.
So in this seagrass meadow, I said it's actually a flowering plant, but it will pull in CO2 from the water. And if you're swimming in a seagrass meadow, sometimes you'll see little bubbles actually coming off the leaves.
Oh,
And so that's
wow.
the oxygen getting released by the blades of seagrass, just like trees produce oxygen. And all of
Right.
the carbon gets stuck down in its root system, which is underwater under the sand. And because it's underwater, it's far more denser in terms of how much carbon accumulates.
Yes.
So
Yep.
if you looked at a backyard full of trees, a backyard full of seagrass can actually trap 10 times as much carbon
Wow.
as those same trees can. So this discovery, there's a number of reasons why it's hugely important, but there's over 1 billion tons. That's a huge number. 1 billion
Yes.
tons of greenhouse gas that's trapped and stored in that seagrass in the Bahamas that would otherwise be in the environment without it.
Oh my gosh. That is a huge
Wow.
discovery. That's huge.
And it was all because of the tiger sharks.
Oh,
They led us straight to it.
gosh. That's amazing.
That is fantastic. So, can you connect a couple of dots for me from when you first saw footage from the tiger sharks cameras of these seagrasses and you started piecing it together? How did you go from there to kind of mapping it all the way to the end? Was this the course of the entire year of tiger sharks? Or have you and the team also been out there like trying to find the skirted edges of it on the boats, etc.?
Both, Jeff. So
Okay.
when we reviewed the footage, we didn't know what we were going to find. So we didn't know
Yeah.
that tiger sharks were going to lead us to seagrass. So our
Right.
team of scientists, after a lot of footage review and a lot of internal discussions, had the great idea of, okay, maybe there is something to tiger sharks spending so much time in seagrass. And it's predominantly because that's where their major food sources are. So they're looking
That's
for
what I was
turtles,
wondering. Yeah.
which are also in seagrass because tiger sharks eat turtles. And so the
Okay.
discovery, came over a number of months. And then we worked with other teams of scientists, people at NASA or people who are using satellites to map different parts of the planet.
Right. Right.
And we did, over the course of the next year, a big mapping analysis using satellites. You can actually look at some of the images that are captured, show where the tiger shark swam. We know there's seagrass there. And then we could train the imagery or train the satellites to actually map where that seagrass is
Wow.
in the Bahamas.
Wow.
So
That's
because
really cool.
this is, basically a carbon sink, is that what you're calling this? I mean,
It is, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's just a place that absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide. Is the water cleaner and the environment healthier above the seagrass?
It is. So not just because of the carbon, but if you look at coral reefs are another great example where there's tons of fish and biodiversity.
Right.
And coral reefs are studied all across the world in places where there's seagrass next to coral reefs. Those coral reefs are healthier and more resilient. So they benefit each other. And seagrass does filter out nutrients. It does fight against rising sea levels. It does provide resources for all of those communities of fish to provide nursery grounds to go and raise small fish, or turtles can graze on it. So there's a number of things that seagrass does, but yes, it does provide a filtration system for the whole ocean.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Not being an ocean conservation professional myself, my brain is wondering, is this something, can we plant more seagrass?
That's what I was going to ask.
You know, we hear all about like plant more trees or plant a garden or do this up on land. Can we plant more seagrass in the ocean to be a bigger help?
We can, and there are places where that work is being done today, Jeff. So it's absolutely important that we try to restore some of those ecosystems, especially where there used to be seagrass and there no longer is today. But as you can imagine, it's very hard to have a map of the ocean. We know so little about the ocean right now. We don't even know exactly where all the seagrass exists on the planet today. So what's equally as important to restoring it is also mapping and protecting and conserving what's there today, because these ecosystems have trapped carbon and are providing so many services. It's easier to protect them than it is to restore them. It costs a lot less to go out and protect what already exists today than to try to recreate it ourselves.
Yeah. And that's what I was wondering. So are there dangers to the seagrass? Some, because we all know, we've heard, well, a lot of us have heard of like coral bleaching and all this kind of stuff. So is the seagrass also have things that might injure it or, make it not like die off or anything like that?
It does. So we are losing seagrass habitat. There's places where it's growing, but as a whole, we're losing 1 to 3% of that seagrass every year on the planet. And that's usually because of some sort of human interaction, whether it's pollution from dumping water that ran off of agriculture fields, or going out and dredging, or dropping anchors, or acidifying waters. So there are impacts to the seagrass. It can't live in every environment. So we need to make sure that we're supporting it as best we can and protecting it and stopping some of the reasons why it's dying off.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So you have been working on this with Beneath the Waves Group for a while now. I think you mentioned 10 years. What do you see different today versus when this whole project began?
So I'm seeing a lot of interest from the different governments and communities, especially small island states around the world, to understand the natural assets or natural capital, all these ecosystems that exist in a lot of their backyards, to understand how to protect it and work with scientists and different groups to provide resources to protect it. So the government of Bahamas actually has a new program where they're protecting all of this seagrass habitat over the next 50 years because of how important it is as a carbon sink. And so the impact of the work, Jeff, or the conservation, is actually working with the different governments and countries to go and restore or conserve, like you said, a lot of this habitat that exists.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And that's, as you said, it's easier to protect what's already there than to replace if we happen to lose it or whatever. So I'm just curious. So we all know that the ocean has different depths. Is seagrass found at certain levels, or are we still learning? Like, can you find it in the deep, deep, deep ocean?
We are still learning, but because it's a plant, I use trees as an analogy on land.
Right.
It does require sunlight to grow. So
Okay. That's what I
once
wanted.
sunlight
Okay.
stops penetrating the water, eventually the plant can't do photosynthesis and grow
Right.
or reproduce. So in places like the Bahamas where the water is really clear, it can grow quite deep.
Right.
I've been
Sure.
down as deep as I want to go scuba diving, 60 feet underwater.
That's
and
pretty
you can
good.
see seagrass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you go up to, my hometown in Boston where it's a little bit murkier and maybe seagrass can only grow in 15 feet of water because light stops penetrating.
I get it. Okay.
So it all
That
depends
makes
on how
sense.
much light can get through the water so that the plant can do photosynthesis.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Can you just talk a little bit more about Beneath the Waves Group and what you guys are doing as an organization?
Yeah. So, Jeff, this partnership with the Tiger Sharks really opened our eyes to a world of possibilities. So what we are doing is we are doing similar studies and similar programs all across the world where we're partnering with nature to learn clues to solve some of our problems. So
Wow.
working with what we call ocean giants, so some of the biggest animals that live in the water,
Yeah.
following their movements, seeing how they're using their ecosystems, mapping, those areas, understanding the importance of them and trying to learn from them. So the tiger shark showed us something we weren't expecting. We definitely believe that partnering with other animals and learning from nature, like I said, will give us clues to other solutions that we may not know exist right now or other really important parts of the ocean.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I want to follow that up. I love the idea of the tracking. I like watching documentaries. I think anybody on this podcast would like documentaries. And I love watching tracks. If we go to Beneath the Waves Group, a website, will we find some of this data to be able to see what it is you've been talking about?
Yes, you might actually be able to see that point of view footage from the dorsal fin of the tiger shark swimming through the seagrass.
Oh, yeah.
So you actually see the shark's head, and some of them are quite big. I mean, we're talking about 12, 13, 14-foot animals.
Oh,
wow.
You can see almost like weaving through the seagrass from the point of view of the shark.
Yeah.
Shark cam, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
That's amazing. Can you tell us the name of your website so everybody can check that out?
Yes. If you went to beneaththewaves.org, that will be the best place to see all the work that we're doing.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I honestly, the way you're telling this story, by the way, is fantastic. I think you're putting the right images in people's heads so they can understand exactly what you guys are doing and how amazing this is. So looking ahead, do you have projects down the road that you want to take a look at to, find out like what other animals are you kind of going to follow?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, some of the bigger animals are sharks. So a really cool project we're working on is looking at basking sharks off of Ireland or studying great white sharks in Mexico or South Africa, Australia. So generally, if you have an apex predator that's spending a lot of time in a specific area, it's because that is an important and productive ecosystem. So
yes,
from a nursery ground to, middle of the food chain next to coral reefs, all the way up to the big predators that need to be efficient with their time because they require a lot of energy to grow and live and swim.
Right.
And a lot of food, right? They have to.
And a lot of food. They're spending a lot of time in areas that also provide a lot of value to us as humans. So, whether it's seafood, whether it's the climate change implications of a carbon sink, those are the projects that we're really interested in, is following some of the big animals in the ocean and just seeing where they take us and learning from them.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think this is so cool to think about. And I love how you say we're partnering with nature, right? Which I think is a great way to have people think about working with nature and the other organisms on the planet. It's not just us, right? We have to kind of live within the ecosystems around us and be aware. So now we're at that point in our show, even though we've had an amazing discussion where I want to ask you what your challenge is for our listeners. And I'm very curious, Wells, what you're going to have our listeners do.
Yes. So my challenge is I would love for anyone listening to the podcast to spend a bit of time outside, maybe this weekend, maybe in a park, maybe in your backyard, maybe even just walking down the street, and really be observant and look around and find some animals, whether it's a bee or a bird or a squirrel, and see how they're interacting with nature. See, are they using a tree? Are they spending time with flowers? And spend 10 minutes and then really think about, what did you learn from that? And is there value that nature is providing to all these different animals that we could learn from as humans as well? Is there something that nature's teaching us that's right under our nose?
Yeah, I love that.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to see how we are interacting with our environment and whether or not we're being helpful or hurtful, right? And figure that part out.
Or at least living in harmony with nature so that we can
there you go.
Support it how it supports us, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's very well said. Very well said. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been such an amazing episode. I've learned a lot about ocean conservation and some stuff that I didn't even know.
You have two new big fans for Beneath the Waves right here in Jen and Jeff.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for being on Solve It for Kids, Wells.
Thank you, Wells.
Bye, everyone.
What an interesting episode. I love learning so much about a single animal species that I didn't know a whole lot about before. And I never really paid attention to how much a single species could affect the entire ocean ecosystem where it lives.
Yeah, I thought this was really amazing. And it's something that we as humans wouldn't think about, right? To put together. But animals know intrinsically, right? They just know how to kind of take care of their environment and how their actions do that. It was really, really fascinating to me. And so it kind of makes sense that his challenge is kind of like we observe animals, right? Which we've heard before, but it seems very pertinent in this episode.
Absolutely. And while we've observed animals before on the podcast as a challenge, I love how Wells added just a little twist. Look at how animals are interacting in their environment. So I see that as three different ways. How an individual animal is acting, how it is interacting with its environment, the plants, the trees, where is it living, walking, swimming, whatever it's doing, and how is it interacting with other animals, whether it be the same species or other species. There is a lot of information to gather if we do this challenge right. And he even asked the question, what did we learn watching those animals?
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be a really fun one, I think. So if all of you listeners go out and do this and want to share what you learned with us, we'd love to hear from you. We are at Kids Solve at Facebook, X, and Instagram. And again, don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we have a page for every episode, and we'll have more information about what they're doing, what tiger sharks are doing, and even hopefully some cool videos. So make sure to check it out.
Jen, I know you live near the ocean in Florida, but me in Colorado, not having an ocean, I can already think about the deer and the birds and the squirrels that I plan on going out to watch to see how they interact with each other. Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on the podcast for kids and families.
Solve it for kids.